Cursed souls become emotional batteries, their suffering converted into waves of malign influence that wash over our world, inciting chaos. The concept may sound abstract, but consider concrete phenomena, sudden outbreaks of war, frenzies of violence, inexplicable surges of hatred in society. Could these be triggered or exacerbated by bursts of loosed hell energy? Modern occult writers use the term loosh to describe energy released by living beings, especially through intense emotions like fear or anguish. Demons, they suggest, harvest loosh much as we burn coal. Now take that idea back a millennium. Medieval people didn't say loosh, but they knew evil begets evil. They feared that sites of great suffering were tainted, blood cries out from the ground, as the Bible says. What if the blood cry is more of a metaphor? What if places soaked in human agony, battlefields, torture chambers, mass graves, continue to radiate that agony, influencing those nearby with restless anger or horror? If mortal suffering can linger as a curse, how much more potent would be the suffering of souls actively tortured in hell? That agony might be directed, by diabolic intent, to seep into our reality at opportune moments. There is a reason why, in folklore, war zones and hellscapes are compared. World War ice trenches were termed hell on earth not just for their misery but for the way men felt something monstrous was feeding on their fear and madness. In an eerie 1917 convergence, during World War I, the Fatima children in Portugal were granted a vision of hell. They described seeing a vast sea of fire with demons and damned souls, who looked like transparent burning embers, amid shrieks and groans of pain and despair. Sister Lucia's memoir notes how the flames seemed to issue from within the souls themselves, and the cacophony of suffering horrified the children. It's as if each soul was a self-contained furnace, generating fire and smoke out of its own agony. Hell was not quiet torment, it was an engine room of wailing and burning, each soul a coal thrown on the fire. Such imagery aligns perfectly with our thesis. The damned generate energetic output, flames, noise, despair, that sustains hell's environment. And if the Virgin Mary showed this to children as a warning, perhaps the warning was not only don't go there but also look what fuels the devil's work. The vision even made clear that demons and souls were together in the flames, suggesting the unclean spirits and human souls are mingled in their torment, possibly exchanging energy. Demons torment to elicit pain, pain strengthens demons. A diabolic symbiosis. Historical accounts of demonic possession often mention that exorcists demand demons tell their names. Sometimes the possessing entity claims to be not a fallen angel but the soul of a particularly evil human damned in hell. Could a human soul become a demon? Officially, theology says no, human souls remain distinct. Yet exorcists like Father Gabriele Amorth, the Vatican's chief exorcist, noted that demons are liars and love to confuse. If a possessing spirit says, "I am Judas" or "I am Nero's soul," it may be deception, or perhaps a damned soul truly sent back up to do the devil's bidding. Even Jesus in the Gospels speaks of an exorcised demon who roams waterless places and then returns with 7 spirits more wicked than itself to repossess a man, almost like reinforcements. Matthew 12 verses 43 to 45. It's not a huge leap to wonder if some of those spirits could be enslaved human souls, forced into the ranks of demonic tormentors. In hell, the oppressed may become the oppressors to inflict pain on others, a perverse chain of cruelty. Folklore gives another perspective, the Wild Hunt, a myth of a ghostly horde racing across the night sky, often led by a dark figure, sometimes identified as the devil. The hunters are sometimes said to be damned souls or sinner spirits pressed into service, chasing the living or heralding war. In Germanic legend, the sound of the wild hunt presaged calamity, a storm of unrest stirred up by restless dead. Here again is the idea that damned or cursed souls can roam and cause real-world effects like storms, panic, or bloodshed. Even more tangibly, consider the notion of cursed objects, specifically those containing or linked to souls. The Dybbuk box in Jewish folklore, for example, is said to house a trapped spirit, a Dybbuk, that brings misfortune. All around the world, museums quietly catalog haunted artifacts that carry an aura of dread, as if imbued with suffering. While these are individual cases, they demonstrate a principle: a soul's negative energy can attach to physical things and people, acting like a poison or radiation. Now scale that up. What if hell has deliberately placed sources of cursed energy in our midst? A downed soul could be anchored to an object or location in the world as a sort of emotional landmine, slowly leaking hate or fear into the surroundings. Some demonologists suspect that mass violence in an area can be triggered or exacerbated by such infernal seeding, essentially a broadcast station of hell's harvested despair. We might find an example in the tumultuous 20th century. There were whispers that Hitler's inner circle sought occult artifacts, like the Spear of Destiny, hoping to tap into supernatural power. While much of that is speculation, it aligns with a grim truth: those on hell's path crave hell's energy. What if certain fascinations, say, with death imagery, or rituals conducted by the Nazis, actually invited streams of hellish influence? When millions of souls were violently killed in the Holocaust and wars, was that purely human evil, or did those events themselves create a feedback loop feeding hell enormous lush which then spilled back into furthering the war? One shudders to think that the unprecedented carnage of the modern era could have an unseen component: hell orchestrating mass suffering to stockpile more energy, a vicious cycle. Gnostic writings warn of archons, rulers of the dark, who keep humanity trapped in cycles of fear and ignorance, feeding off low vibrational states. This is essentially the same claim, that our negative emotional states are intentionally stoked by unseen forces. If the archons of Gnostic lore equate to demons or devilish agents, then their food is our fear. A logical strategy for them would be to take down souls who are nothing but fear and rage, and use them like broadcasting beacons. Imagine each downed soul as a radio transmitter, continuously emitting the frequency of its torment. Now imagine thousands, millions of such transmitters, all operating from hell or the astral plane. The result would be a kind of dark resonance blanketing humanity, nudging hearts toward anger, minds toward madness, communities toward conflict. We might call it psychic pollution or spiritual warfare. Either way, it is weaponized emotion. One astonishing hint of this appears in suppressed church lore, an alleged device called the chronovisor, supposedly built under Vatican auspices in the 20th century, to view past and future events. Rumors claim it even glimpses spiritual realities. If such a device existed, and this is speculative, did it show scenes of souls in agony influencing earthly events? We have no proof of that. But we do have the consistent testimony of saints and seers that the world is embroiled in a struggle not just of flesh and blood, but of powers and principalities, spiritual forces of evil. Those forces would logically employ every asset, every store of power they have. And the greatest store of power in hell is the misery of the damned. To illustrate how specific and targeted this influence might be, let's recount a lesser-known legend, the cursed bells of Saint Nicodemus. In a small Italian town, it was said the church bells were recast